You are listening to a podcast of the Fahey and Chivari Show, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. on Thursdays, only on SportstownChicago.com.
Fahey and Chivari on SportstownChicago.com.
Back here at the SportstownChicago.com studios in Lombard, Illinois, I'm Paul Chivari alongside Ryan Fahey for the Fahey and Chivari Show. And if you are a regular listener of the show, you'll know what this music means. It means it's time to bring in our guy, freelance writer Gabe Salgado. We're talking a little Bears-Patriots and the state of the Bears this time around. And Gabe has been a very, very busy guy, and so have I. And now finally we're both on the phone together doing this. It's been a long time. So, Gabe, how you doing? It's been a while, man.
So the next time that you and Ryan have an argument, just make sure you leave the studio door closed so the rest of the studio doesn't hear you.
Fair enough.
That's pretty good. I think that's a pretty fair statement. All right, let's get into it, Gabe. Again, thanks for joining us here on the Fahey and Chivari Show, as always. So when you look at this Bears team going into Sunday, how much optimism is there really for the Bears to try to pull off an upset in Foxborough?
Oh, man, I could tell you right now, Tom Brady's probably licking his chops, and he's probably ready to throw for 500 yards and 6 touchdowns. And, I mean, really, just the state of this team, I'm listening to these press conferences during the week, and I really think there's a whole lot of denial going around. I mean, this team, okay, they're 3-4, they're only one game below 500, but they're a bad 3-4 team. You know, I mean, offense has struggled over the last couple of weeks. Defense can't cover anybody. I mean, aside from Jeremiah Ratliff, there's no sacks, there's no penetration, and I mean, really, I don't see how, barring some miracle, that the Bears can stop this Patriots offense.
When you look at last week's outburst in the locker room, Brandon Marshall talking to the team, and the way the Bears performed the last few losses that they've had, do you get the sense that Mark Trestman's really lost control of this team and lost control of that locker room?
Sometimes I wonder if he even had control to begin with. I mean, you just take a look at, you know, how all that transpired according to various reports, depending on which writers you read and such. But, you know, I mean, obviously, you know, Mark Trestman, you know, he's not the type of guy to yell and scream and things like that. But maybe he needs to start doing that and get better control of that locker room. You know, I mean, you know, God forbid a fight breaks out in that locker room one day because guys are disagreeing or, you know, one guy's upset with another because of their poor play. I mean, really, you've got to do a better job of managing than that, and that was a clear sign of that on Sunday.
Are you a fan of the rotating carousel of Bears captains week in and week out? Myself and Paul talked about it earlier in the show, and I'm not saying it's like the dumbest thing I've ever seen in the NFL, but I don't think it's one of the brightest moves I've seen an NFL coach make.
Yeah, I mean, Mike Zuka said it best. You know, there's no leaders on that team. He said that the other day in the Chicago Sun-Times, something along those lines, and I'd have to agree with him. I mean, I think that, you know, when you're looking for leaders, you got to have a solid group of captains. You can't just keep rotating guys every week because it sounds like you're rewarding somebody who performed better than this other player in practice or whatever the system is for that. And that obviously has to change because under Lovie Smith, there was always the same set group of captains unless somebody got injured. So I definitely think that the Bears need to figure that out and make that adjustment accordingly.
This morning, Brian Urlacher said in an interview on a different Chicago radio station that he said financially Jay Cutler is one of the elite guys in the NFL, but he hasn't produced like an elite quarterback. He went on to compare him to Tom Brady, the Manning brothers, Aaron Rodgers, and Breeze, and saying that those guys find a way to win when they don't have people around them or when they have adversity, whereas Jay has all of his weapons and can't figure it out. Do you want to support that sort of claim by Urlacher, or do you think he's just trying to kind of rile things up, you know, with that kind of a bitterness that he might harbor from not being re-signed a couple of years ago? Do you think he's kind of stirring the pot at this point, or do you think he's got something, he's got a good point right there?
Well, ever since Brian Urlacher left the Bears, he's always been trying to stir the pot, but I think at this time he has a point. I mean, you just take a look at how Jay Cutler was given all that money, but he's still making bad decisions. He's still acting on impulse as opposed to intelligence. And, you know, really the Bears' offense was supposed to progress this season, and they've regressed instead. And really it's just a bad situation. And unfortunately the Bears, there's not really much they can do about it because they're tied to him for at least the next 3 years because he's guaranteed $54 million in that time span. So, you know, if they cut him, they have to pay him the money that he's guaranteed. And if they trade him, is anybody going to be willing to take on that contract? So the Bears are in a no-win situation here. So as mad as Brian Urlacher might be towards the organization, this time he has a point.
Freelance writer Gabe Salgado with us here on the Illinois Center for Broadcasting Hotline. It's the Fahey and Chivari Show here on SportsTownChicago.com. You guys can follow Gabe on Twitter at GabeSalgado82. Now let's switch over to the defensive side of the ball here for the Bears, Gabe. The situation with Kyle Fuller with the broken hand and his bad hip, he was limited in practice today along with Martellus Bennett. Jared Allen did not play or participate, I should say, in practice. Coach's decision, not injury related though. When we look at this Bears defense now, when you look at the injury to Kyle Fuller, and one of the few bright spots that we took from the Dolphins game was the defensive line play getting the pressure to quarterback Ryan Tannehill. Is that something that we're going to need to really key in on for the Bears to even have some chance in not necessarily stopping Tom Brady, but containing that Patriots offense?
Definitely. Obviously, they got a few sacks on Ryan Tannehill last week, and other than that, the defensive line was largely ineffective, and they're definitely going to have to step it up because, Tom Brady's similar to Aaron Rodgers in the sense where it doesn't take long for him to find the open guy, and when he does, there's only so much you can do about it unless you got really tight coverage from the secondary. But if there's no pass rush, Tom Brady's going to have a field day, and the Bears definitely need to find a way to contain that.
With Shane Vereen and the Patriots running game going against this Bears defense, you got to think that Vereen's going to have a pretty big day. But he's going up against his brother Brock Vereen, the Bears secondary player. How far into the game do you think it'll be before we see Brock Vereen tackle his brother Shane Vereen?
That depends on one, how well, Chris Conte and whoever starts next to him plays, and two, it also depends on if anybody gets injured. So, I'm sure they'll probably rotate guys at some point, but I'm sure at some point in the game you'll see both brothers in there. And I'd be surprised if that didn't happen.
One of the few advantages that the Bears kind of do have going into the game against the Patriots is the tall, athletic wide receivers in Alshon Jeffrey and Brandon Marshall. Regardless of the outcome, do you expect them to be a big factor, Gabe, in this Sunday's matchup?
I hope so, because they really haven't done much the last couple of weeks. They really haven't done much since the Atlanta game, and really it's just, Jay Cutler needs both of his guys, putting up high numbers if they're going to have any chance to win this thing. And if Jay Cutler keeps making the mistakes like he's been making, Marshall and Jeffrey are going to be non-factors. So it all depends on, how Cutler, takes care of the ball.
When you analyze this 3-4 Bears team, what are the top three things that are the reason why they're 3-4 right now? What's been the story of this season as to why they haven't been successful?
Well, the biggest reason would be lack of a pass rush. They haven't really done much, as far as like getting sacks and getting pressure all year. So that's the first thing. The second thing is the mistakes from Jay Cutler. Just throwing the interceptions and turnovers and just really putting his team in a bad situation. And the third thing, and as much as I hate to say this, Mark Trestman needs to do a better job of managing his team, because obviously it just seems like things are starting to slowly spiral out of control.
I wanted to elaborate on that because you said you didn't really want to go to that point. It seems like you're not a person that doesn't want to scrutinize coaching. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm trying to get your viewpoint. But do you also have this feeling that I do, where just coming off that last game, you start sensing, maybe Mark Trestman just wasn't ready. He'd be a good offensive coordinator, but managing an NFL team, he's just not the right guy for the right job. Is that kind of the direction of your thinking with Trestman?
I'm not ready to go there yet, but you take a look at the differences between this year and last year. Last year when the offense was doing well, everybody was happy. This year, offense isn't doing well, and it doesn't help the defense because they've had their struggles and everybody's not happy. And ultimately, it falls on the head coach to rally the troops and fix all that. And it doesn't look like he's doing that. I won't go ahead and say fire him already, but I definitely think that he needs to find a way to get a better grip on his players.
What would be that way to try to get a better grip on your players? Is it the yelling and being more emotional in practice and in the locker room? Would that be the key to try to maybe, if we say control the locker room in terms of the head coach, keeping control of his players?
That's part of it. I also think that he needs to, be more of a disciplinarian at times when the time calls for it. Like after last week's locker room issue, you got to wonder where was Trestman when all of that was going on. And I definitely think that, he needs to do a better job of enforcing things and instilling certain qualities in his team, because obviously it just seems like, especially with the whole rotating captain thing, it's like, you're saying I trust this group of guys to lead my team this week, but I won't trust them again next week, and it's really just an unbalanced thing going on. So I think those are the things that Trestman needs to work on in that locker room.
Gabe, who wins on Sunday, and what's the final score, and why does that team win?
I'm going to go Patriots 35-21, simply because, the way that they've been playing the last few weeks since they lost that Kansas City Monday night game, they've really just been unstoppable on offense, and I really don't see, like I said, with the struggles that the Bears have, I really don't see them stopping Tom Brady.
You guys can follow Gabe on Twitter as well, the freelance writer, at Gabe Salgado82. He is a regular here on the Fahey and Chivari show, and it's always a pleasure to have him on the program. Gabe, we always appreciate you dropping the knowledge here on the program, whatever the sport it is. We'll talk to you once again soon as the football season continues, and any other sport continues as well. We'll be sure to talk about that with you as well. Have a great day, Gabe.
You too, guys.
You're listening to Fahey and Chivari on SportsTownChicago.com.